Hi, my name is James Saracini. I'm the Communications and Marketing Director for Grades of Green, and we're here for the Phase 3 video. It's part of our speaker series, and we're very, very excited to be here with Dana Murray with the City of Manhattan Beach. Dana, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Dana Murray, and I've worked for the City of Manhattan Beach for the last 2.5 years. I'm the city's Environmental Sustainability Manager, and previously I've had different jobs such as a Peace Corps volunteer living abroad. I've also worked for several environmental nonprofits in the area, like Tree People, the California Wildlife Center, and Heal the Bay, where I was their Senior Coastal Policy Manager.
What we're really excited about talking with you today is all of that experience is really helpful for us and for our students to learn about something that's very important to their campaign, and that's the pitch, which is basically, you have a lot of experience doing this. But basically the point of the pitch is to create a sort of like outreach material that you would then deliver to a very key audience. And that sort of deliverable, that thing that you're doing, is basically going to convince them to make a change in their habit or to advocate for a change at the city level, at the government level. And so Dana has a lot of experience doing that. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So could you talk, first of all, what is sort of the most important piece when you're developing your pitch?
I would say the most important piece about developing your pitch would be to make sure it's well researched and that you have facts that you're using to convince someone of what you're trying to say. The other thing is that the more personal you can make your pitch, the more people will listen. So if you're just reading off a sheet and there's also not personal story attached to it, it's a lot more forgettable.
One of the things that we've seen in some of the research that we've done around a pitch and some of the things that our students are going to be looking at is the importance of that why statement and why it's important to the person delivering that speech or that pitch. Could you talk a little bit about how that really elevates a pitch and makes it a lot more engaging and convincing?
So I know that when I've spoken before state agencies like the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, when I spoke personally about me being a scuba diver, and spending time in the ocean, and then I would talk about a marine policy with facts, they listened to me because I started up by explaining like my connection to the issue. Same thing with when I have testified for the city of Redondo Beach, because I'm a resident, I lead with saying I'm a resident in this city, I'm a mom, I'm a Girl Scout leader, so you're showing your connection to that community and why you're invested there, and also why they should listen to you. So if it's a student, let's say it's a student from Culver City, and they want to give public testimony before the Culver City City Council. I would lead with saying, I'm a 7th grade student here in Culver City. I've lived here my whole life. I'm involved in lots of different clubs, and one of the things I'm most concerned about is, and then you go on to your subject. But if you start with your connection to the issue, your connection to the place, especially if you're talking about local government, the connection to the place will matter a lot to those decision makers.
Excellent. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, and you've touched on that in some of your responses, is knowing your audience and the importance of understanding who that audience is, the things that are driving their decisions, whether it's an elected official or maybe it's a school board or maybe it's even a teacher or a parent. What is it about knowing your audience that makes a pitch successful?
I think if you know your audience, you know where their perspective is. So let's go back to if it's a mayor or a city council member for a city, they've been elected by the residents that live there. And so that's who they want to listen to because that's who they're representing. At the same time, it's good to know if they're decision makers and they need to make a decision, making it clear what your ask is to them. Because I've seen many people go up and give public testimony and talk all about the issue, but they don't really get to what they're asking for. So I would always start with saying, after you give your kind of credentials, state your main goal, why you're there speaking to them, what you want them to do. Then you give 3 reasons why or 3 issues that you care most about, and then finish it up at the end, what your ask is.
What's a good structure for a pitch? You outlined it a little bit there, but is it the kind of thing where you want to start with a problem and then move to a solution? Are there different sort of structures that work well?
Sure. So we'll start with what we've already covered. So I would start with, introducing yourself, especially if it's filmed or you have a recorder. So any government agencies, whether it's state, federal level, or local government, and possibly even school board, I mean, they have to take legal documentation of what was discussed there. Often it's videotaped, so they need to know your name and where you're from. So definitely always start with that. You can also start with a nice greeting. So even myself as a staff for a city, when I speak to our city council, I'll say, "Good evening, mayor and city council members, my name is," and then you start into it. So do a greeting, introduce who you are, then you have your ask. So, I'm speaking to you tonight to urge you to vote yes on ordinance XXX, whatever it might be. And then you go into the reasons why. One thing I've often told people, and my mentors many years ago told me, is don't cover more than 3 things. You want to cover 1 to 3 things. So you might have a list of 20 reasons why they should do what you're saying, but they're going to lose you past probably 2 or 3 of them. So pick the 1, 2, or 3 most important parts of it to you, or the most compelling facts or backing to why it's important, and just stick to those 1 to 3 topics.
Excellent. So one of the things that you touched on there that's really cool is by knowing your audience when you're going through that ask,
Mm-hmm.
you're recognizing their action, for instance. What if you're talking about what if the audience for this pitch is somebody who may not be an elected, who may be a business owner, maybe it's a mom or a dad, or maybe it's a teacher or a friend even, who our students may be pitching to get them to change their habits.
So I'd say for a more informal kind of pitch, one thing you're going to have is less time. And so the main thing I think is just to make sure you have what's called an elevator pitch, which is usually how would you describe the issue and what you're asking. So make sure it's still that same formula where you know what the problem is. You can describe it very quickly or succinctly. Then you can state what the solution is. What are you asking them to change? What are you asking them to do?
Our students oftentimes are in meetings, they're giving a presentation, and they often ask us, like, what should we bring? What kind of visuals should we bring? Are those effective? Should we do a big poster? Should we do something simple? What advice do you have for folks trying to do a pitch, and what should they bring with them?
I think it depends on what sort of meeting that you're having. If you are meeting with a business and you're trying to explain to them better products they could use, absolutely having some examples in your hand of options they have, if there's like a little education guide or a 1-page fact sheet, those are helpful for one-on-one meetings or quick pitches, those sort of things. But if you're speaking before like a decision-making body, a more formal public testimony, I wouldn't go with posters, I wouldn't go with small kind of things. But what you can do is that there have been kind of attention-getting type props, and as long as they're not disruptive to a public process, I've noticed that they have been pretty effective. For instance, some nonprofit groups had collected plastic straws from cleanups, and they sewed together what's called the monstrosity. It's basically the next version of the plastic bag monster, but made out of plastic straws. And I know when there were some grades of green students, one of them dressed up as that, and then 2 or 3 on a team went down to the podium together and spoke. The kid that was wearing the monstrosity got a lot of attention. And also it'll get the attention of media if you're dressed in a costume that's applicable to the topic. Those are the pictures, those are the images that the media is going to want to put on the front page, and that's going to give you free advertisement for your issue.
One of the other things that I wanted to talk about, especially when it comes to talking to elected officials, but oftentimes even businesses, especially sort of executives in businesses, is getting access and getting a meeting. It's really hard for any of us to find a meeting with somebody who is a big decision maker or in a company or in a government or even in a school. What are some tips that you have from your history for getting in front of those folks and getting those meetings? Because our students are often trying to find those.
So if they're public officials, meaning if they're part of a city council, if they're a mayor, if they're part of a state agency, then it's part of their job is to listen to what the public is saying. And so you can always request a meeting with those decision makers or those elected officials. If they have the availability, that's another issue. But what we would typically ask for, if that person kind of lives further away, but you need to meet with them, you can do a phone meeting with them for about 15 minutes. Usually you want to ask for 15 minutes.
If they don't hear back or if they hear a no, what's sort of the next step be?
I mean, I would probably try 2 or 3 times. If you got a response and they said, we do not have any time in the next 2 weeks, then I would say then you try to do something later.
So I just wanted to say thanks on behalf of Grades of Green and all of our students to Dana for taking the time for us and to talk through these really excellent options and to talk through these really excellent sort of points and pointers for getting in front of folks, when you're in front of them, how to deliver a pitch, and what's the best way to give that pitch so that you're the most convincing. So stay tuned for our next couple of videos about the following phases.